Halloween Horror Nights has been going on for a long time now. With over 34 years of frightening haunted houses, spooky scare zones, and fan favorite shows, hundreds if not thousands of ideas have leaped from the drawing board to be used in the event's 3 decades of history. And while the creatives behind Horror Nights always do a freaky good job of picking the perfect experiences for the night, some of the choices over the past 34 years can be described as a little weird. So in this video, I want to go over the weird history of Halloween Horror Nights. Shows, mazes, and characters that have existed over the years of this event that kind of make you say, huh? And it's not that these experiences were bad, just interesting. Most of these are going to be things that would never ever happen again in a modern Halloween Horror Nights event. Let's talk about them. The first one that I want to talk about is probably the biggest one on this list, and it is something called Robosaurus. So Robosaurus is exactly what you imagine it is. It is a 4-story tall, 30-ton gigantic robot that breathed 40-foot flames from its mouth and nose. Robosaurus was created in 1989 by Doug Melwicki, an inventor, for $2.2 million, and it took him 2 years to build. A couple years later, Robosaurus premiered at Halloween Horror Nights 1992, the first year that HHN changed its name over from Fright Nights. This was one of the 17 shows that were at the event that year. The reason there were so many shows was because there were only 2 haunted houses. The Robosaurus show happened in the New York area of the park by the New York Public Library facade, and basically what would happen is Robosaurus would sit there during the daytime all kind of tucked in its ball, and at nighttime for Halloween Horror Nights it would activate and the big dinosaur would come to life, walk a little out towards the New York City street, and what it did was it would go down, it would grab a car, pick it up, smash it in its arms, take a bite out of it with its dinosaur mouth, drop it on the floor, and then roar and then shoot fire out of its mouth. For its first year, it was a pretty simple show, but later stunt actors were added to the show to be people fighting Robosaurus. The show went on for 3 years and then took a long pause, where it then returned in 2006 for Halloween Horror Nights Sweet 16. The reason it came back was that this was the first anniversary year Universal ever celebrated for Halloween Horror Nights. So there was a big focus on remaking classic haunted houses and scare zones and bringing back older shows, and Robosaurus was one of them. Robosaurus was part of the Deadtropolis scare zone, which was a city overrun by zombies. The Robosaurus show featured the Deadtropolis zombies all gathering up to attack the humans, where they finally summon Robosaurus like a Megazord, and he scares them away by picking up a car and throwing it and breathing fire because zombies are really afraid of falling cars. This was unfortunately the last time that we have seen Robosaurus at HHN. Now, Robosaurus travels across America, picking up cars and shooting fire, and has even made a couple appearances in movies and TV shows. And when I was looking up stuff about Robosaurus, I found out that there was a made-for-TV pilot called Steel Justice that featured Robosaurus. And I have no idea what it's about, but basically it was like in the future and there was a cop and he used Robosaurus to fight crimes. And this was a pilot. They tried to make it into a TV show, but based off of its 3.4 out of 10 star rating on IMDb, it did not succeed. Robosaurus is such a wild idea and something that could really only exist in the early years of Halloween Horror Nights. But with HHN 35 coming around the corner, the 35th anniversary of this event, maybe there's space for the big old dinosaur to come back and smash a car in front of modern audiences. Another unique show concept that I hope comes back one day is one that I never got to see in person, and it was called Death Drums. Death Drums was a show for Halloween Horror Nights 21 in 2011. This was a street show that featured live drummers and dancers dressed as zombies. This was kind of like Blue Man Group or Stomp the Musical, if you're familiar with that, where they had actual drum sets but also used trash can lids to make noise. It happened 3 times a night in different locations throughout the park, and each show was themed to different genres of music, which is a pretty cool idea. The drummers also performed on 2 multi-level story towers that would roll out in the street before the show started. Looking at videos of Death Drums, I thought it looked interesting, but looking at comments from 2011, a lot of the people seem very mixed on the show. But I also think that audiences wanted different things back then, and nowadays with how much Horror Nights has grown, it's kind of hard to put on shows that block up the street like this one did. But the people yearn for street shows in the park again, Universal. It doesn't have to be only scare zones that keep us moving and buying express passes. Give us some entertainment on the streets, even if it is something like Death Drums again. If anyone watching this video saw Death Drums, what did you think about it? Please let us know in the comments down below. So Horror Nights is known for street shows like the ones we've talked about, but did you know that there used to be a parade? It was called the Festival of the Dead Parade, and a few different versions of it ran for a couple years throughout the event. The first was the Crypt Keepers Festival of the Dead Parade in 1996. This parade featured 5 floats and had scare actors, stilt walkers, and the chainsaw drill team walking along the route with them. This parade also featured the Crypt Keeper, HHN's unofficial mascot for multiple years, on one of the last floats. The easiest way to describe this parade was that it was like a spooky version of the Mardi Gras parade that Universal does every year, where the performers threw beads and even coins at guests watching the show. Coins used to be a big thing during Universal events and unfortunately have gone away. The parade went on for a couple more years, including in 2000 where they actually had a whole float themed to Jack the Clown, Horror Nights' first official icon, and a stilt walker dressed as him too. It took a hiatus after 2001, and then returned in 2004 for one last time. And honestly, will probably never happen again. There's just no way in modern HHN to accommodate the amount of people walking around this event and do a parade. This was an experience that I never got to see for myself, and I know a lot of people loved. Hopefully one day the Festival of the Dead, and more specifically those coins, come back to take us to the midway of the bazaar. Now this next one on my list is kind of one that I hope doesn't really happen again, because, you know, Halloween Horror Nights, especially now, can create such amazing immersive houses with incredible details. But sometimes, in the past, they make a chain link fence for you to walk around in. Over the years of Halloween Horror Nights, there have been 3 noteworthy cage mazes, is what I'll call them. The first one was Run in 2001, which was meant to be an evil game show where contestants, aka us, were meant to run for our lives down chain link fence halls and escape chainsaw-wielding maniacs. In 2001, this was going to be the icon house for Eddie Schmidt, Jack the Clown's brother, and was also planned to be one of the most intense houses in HHN history. But because of the September 11th attacks in America, the year's event got drastically toned down. So the Run idea never got to fully form. The house that guests got that year was mostly cages, but still lightly themed. But in 2006, Run came back for the Sweet 16 with Run Hostile Territory, and this is where Eddie finally got his chance to shine in his own haunted house. A few years later, in 2015, for the 25th anniversary, Run also came back as Run Blood, Sweat, and Fears, which focused more on like the game show aspect of Run. There weren't any chain link fences in this house, but the most ultimate of the chain link fence cage maze was Rat Run in 2005, which was literally a chain link fence maze built in the Boneyard, which is now known as the Rocket Stage area. This was the year of the Storyteller, and while the majority of the event was at Islands of Adventure, a small section of Universal Studios Florida was available for rides and Rat Run. This was also my first year going to the event. Going through the maze, I promise you, it was literally just a big chain link maze, and Jack the Clown was up on a platform above, heckling people with a megaphone as they went through the maze. There weren't any performers in Rat Run, but guests observing the maze could press buttons on the side to spray water, air, or even change the walls in the maze. I don't remember if this was like classified as one of the haunted houses for the event that year, but I mean, come on, look, it's literally a chain link maze. If it was considered a haunted house, this is probably the fastest one they've ever put up. But this is not the last of the cage mazes. In 2011, there was a scare zone called Night Maze, and this was in the street formerly known as Shrek Alley, which is now the path between VillainCon and the Transformers ride, and all it was chain link fences covered in black tarp that were moved by scare actors in hoods throughout the night. So the idea was that it would change every time you went through. Ooh, honestly, it was kinda lame, and also the last scare zone to ever be used in this street. Luckily for us, it seems like Halloween Horror Nights has moved on from this era of chain link fence mazes, and now we're just getting constantly amazing, high-quality, immersive experiences. So with the cage mazes, we can see that a chain link fence maze is one of the simplest forms of entertainment Horror Nights has offered to us over the years. But what happens when they go a little too over the top with a concept? That brings us to the repository. This was only done once for Halloween Horror Nights in 2016, and this was an upcharge virtual reality experience themed to Legendary Truth. Now, it wasn't necessarily like a haunted house, it was more like an HHN escape room with live actors and VR headsets. I actually got to do this one time. The idea of the repository was that you were enlisted by the Legendary Truth, which, if you don't know, is this kind of faction, this group of people in Halloween Horror Nights lore that investigate paranormal activities. And you were there visiting them to break the curse of something. I really don't remember. It was a long time ago. But it was a cool experience. You went through different rooms where scenes were being played out with actors. And in each of the rooms, like an escape room, you had to do different things. Like, I remember there was one room, you were in a big library and there was a bunch of props and things like that. And you had to go and look for certain things. And then you went into another room and there was an actor who was like an insane asylum patient, and you had to like find the key to unlock him, and he was kind of like scaring you as you were crawling through the room. And then the big moment of the repository was they would split the group up halfway and then put you in a big empty room where you'd get a virtual reality headset and have like a VR experience. I remember having to stand in the middle of a room completely still and like look around in the virtual reality to like find clues to our experience, and like different visuals would come up. But the most impressive part was there was a scene in the virtual reality where like crows flew out towards you, and then you felt the feathers of the crows on your face. And I was like so blown away by that. And I'm pretty sure what was going on was that while I was just standing there being awed by the virtual reality in 2016, a team member was just like tickling my face with feathers. Then after that, you take the virtual reality headset off, you'd like run down a hallway, and then they put you into this like ancient Legends of the Hidden Temple style room where you had to solve a puzzle with all these different cubes, and you kind of got put in there with a bunch of random people. And I remember doing the puzzle, and we didn't win the puzzle. We lost at the end because I was too polite, and I let the guy who was doing it, I let him pick, even though I knew the answer. I knew how to solve the puzzle, but I was just being polite, and then we lost the repository experience. But it's okay, because even if you win, even if you lose, you still got a little sticker at the end of the group color that you were in for the repository. And it wasn't super popular. I don't think a lot of people did it. I think it was about $50 to do. So, which, nowadays doesn't seem like a lot, but back then when people were paying for tickets for Halloween Horror Nights in 2016, I don't think people were willing to pay an additional amount to do an extra haunted house. You know what I mean? You want to pay for a ticket and have all of the haunted houses available to you. But I do think it was a really cool idea, and I wish Halloween Horror Nights played with this idea a little bit more. I do love the idea of an upcharge haunted house. And people always talk about like, oh, what if they did an extreme haunted house where you paid more money to do it? I think that would be pretty darn cool. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments about upcharge experiences for Halloween Horror Nights. Is the repository something you would have done? Let me know down below. The repository introduced a new way to be involved with Halloween Horror Nights, but there is an old-fashioned way of doing it as well, and it involves lots and lots of bugs. Infestation was a show at Halloween Horror Nights in 2003 and featured the director, the icon of this year's event, as a host, where he was filming his latest movie. Guests from the park, regular people, had to be 18 or older to audition for this show, where they would put your head in a box, give you some little swimming goggles to wear, and spin the director's wheel to find out what they were gonna pour on your head. And I mean, you had a couple good options. You had snakes, scorpions, beetles, roaches, and rats. There was even a section for the director's choice, which I could only assume was whatever he thought would make you hate your life the most in that moment. Again, another great instance of something that they were able to do 20 years ago, but definitely can't do now. But speaking of rats, I gotta talk about what, in my opinion, one of the true original icons of Halloween Horror Nights, way before Jack the Clown, has existed longer than all those guys. We gotta talk about the Rat Lady. The Rat Lady has been with the event since 1991, all the way up into 2015, where we saw her last. And the Rat Lady is exactly what you expect it to be. It's a lady laying in a glass coffin filled with rats. Now, obviously, it wasn't the same Rat Lady all these years. There have been many different performers who were the Rat Lady, but she has existed in the event in one way or another for many, many years. Her first appearance was in Dungeon of Terror in 1991. That was Universal's first haunted house for Fright Nights, which was described as taking 20 minutes to get through. It was all kind of random different scenes of scary stuff and movie slashers and stuff like that, but there was a scene in that haunted house featuring the Rat Lady, where you were walking down a dark hallway and the floor was dark, and then it would light up and it would reveal that you were walking on top of the Rat Lady and all the rats were under you. She was in Dungeon of Terror and other haunted houses for a couple years until eventually she was let out, and then they would roll her coffin all around the park so people could see the Rat Lady while they were walking around. I remember there being a scare zone in the Central Park area called Cirque du Freak, which was based off of a movie that came out that same year, and the Rat Lady was in that area as well. She really has been everywhere, and in my opinion, the Rat Lady is a really big part of like Halloween Horror Nights history. It feels like such classic HHN. Her last appearance at the event was in 2015, the 25th anniversary event, appropriately located in the Icons Scare Zone. And honestly, that is where she belongs, because to me, the Rat Lady is like OG Halloween Horror Nights. She has been there from the beginning. I remember in the early years of Horror Nights when I first started going, it was something that I always looked forward to seeing, even just for a little bit. Again, just like Robosaurus, the 35th anniversary is coming up. That's going to be a really, really big year, and I do hope in some way, shape, or form, the Rat Lady does make an appearance again. But I also think that setup isn't really something that can be done with modern audiences. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, I just don't think it could happen. But I wanted to make sure that if I was going to talk about the history of Halloween Horror Nights, that I did not forget about the Rat Lady, one of the weirdest parts of it. Rat Lady, in my opinion, is one of the most recognizable Halloween Horror Nights characters, but over the years, there have been some characters that are maybe not as recognizable. I am, of course, talking about the Treaks and Foons. So these guys were created in 2002 for Islands of Fear, the first ever HHN at IOA. And what was really cool was that all of the different scare zones were tied to the theme of the land. There's a lot of great videos about this event, specifically a lot of information on Island Under Siege, which was the Marvel Superhero Island scare zone where the villains had taken over and defeated all the heroes. Toon Lagoon had the Treaks and Foons. And Treaks and Foons is a play on words. They just switched the two letters, and where instead of freaks and tunes, it's Treaks and Foons. And these guys were basically meant to be demented cartoons. They were bright, fluorescent, they looked like egghead clowns, kind of like if you think of like Tweedledee and Tweedledum from the new Alice in Wonderland movies, that's what they looked like. And they were just kind of silly guys, you know, they had these big sloppy arms, they'd kind of pop up to you, or more creepy than actually scary. But the memorable thing about Treaks and Foons was that the scare zone itself was in Toon Lagoon, and in the main street, it was a gigantic foam party. Like literally the entire main street of Toon Lagoon was filled with foam, over 10-foot tall piles of it. The performers would just hide inside the foam, and you were totally okay to walk through. It was just the pathway that you went through, which to me is crazy because like that would never ever happen in the modern age of Halloween Horror Nights. No way would they ever allow people to like walk through a giant pile of foam where they could slip or get soap in their eyes or anything really. A bunch of different things could happen. So much liability. If people didn't want to walk through the foam though, there was an alternate path. You could go through the Toon Lagoon gift shop to stay out of the foam. But I think that area was so memorable because of that foam party, and the Treaks and Foon characters were pretty silly looking too. Though 2002 was probably the last time we would ever see a giant foam party like that at Halloween Horror Nights, the Treaks and Foons did make other appearances over the years. In 2007, during the Carnival of Carnage, they had kind of like an unofficial scare zone in Shrek Alley, where the Night Maze was. And in 2021, for the 30th anniversary of Halloween Horror Nights, the Treaks and Foons actually had their own little stage set up in Lights Camera Haction, Eddie's Revenge. This scare zone was kind of a tribute to all the different scare zones and kind of the history of Halloween Horror Nights, and the Treaks and Foons are absolutely a very memorable part of the weird history of Halloween Horror Nights. And that, my friends, is what I've got for the weird history of Halloween Horror Nights. And I mean, I guess the event as a whole is pretty weird, it's pretty scary, it's pretty frightening, and this is definitely not all of the weird things that have happened over the 34 years of Halloween Horror Nights. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment down below to let me know, and maybe I'll do another one of these find some more strange deep cuts of HHN. But until then, I'm going to get on out of here. Thank you guys for watching another Vincent Vision, and I will see you in the fog. Ha!